And I had always told myself if I could have a different setup, if I could live somewhere else, if I could be with someone else, there might be difference, right? So fast forward, I did experience a divorce, and then I stepped into a second marriage, and all of the outside things changed. It was a very big change. About a year and a half into that marriage, all of a sudden I'm still me in my head. All of a sudden, all those thoughts about whether I was good enough or not, or whether I wanted to even live or not, entered me again and became present. And that was when I realized it had nothing to do with what was outside of me and a whole lot more to do with what was going on inside of me.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. Today, I have on the show Teri Walthall. Hi, Teri. Thanks
Hi,
for being here.
Julie. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited about our discussion. We have met before, and but I'm not very familiar with your story, so I'm really thrilled to have you here and hear more about your story. Like we were talking about before we even went on live, it's like when we hear other people's spiritual experiences, it like opens our eyes to our own spiritual experiences, and it also points out the uniqueness of our experiences and also um, the things that are alike, the things that are kind of universal in our experiences. So anyway, just that little caveat and introduce yourself. Let us know, tell us a little bit about yourself and what the work that you're doing now.
Thank you, Julie. I'm Teri, as Julie told you, and I am currently a professional intuitive, a professional speaker, and an astrologist is how I like to spend my time. And that has happened just recently in the last couple of years. Before that, I spent 40 years being a teacher and a music teacher specifically, and about 47 years searching for the perfect life, the perfect thing that was going to make everything understandable. And then I started to understand perfect is doesn't exist. And actually tapping into self and self-awareness and self-fulfillment is what really allows the pieces of your life to come together. So about 7 years ago, I found energy work, and I have then since opened it to my spiritual gifts and become my own authority in my life.
I love that. I love that. Well, take us back in kind of the beginning of your story. Perhaps there's a story or something that you remember where you realized that something else, was working in your life, not just what you physically see around you.
Thank you. I grew up in a high demand religion, is how they call that. And I am an obedient soul. I just always have been. I'm Virgo by nature, and they tend to be obedient and want to be the rule followers. And so that worked very well in my life for a little while. When I was 11 years old, I was sitting on the back row of the children's group at church, and we were singing, and there were tears flowing down my face. And I didn't recognize that that was happening to me because it always happened to me. I feel connection through singing and through music until the song leader at the front of the room stopped the whole room and pointed to me and said, "See that? She's feeling the spirit."
Oh dear.
And so it was a little traumatic in the moment because I did not want them all looking at me. However, I'm glad she pointed out because I didn't recognize that that was so common for me. I just would wipe the tears away and go on with my life, right? So to see that that gift started that early helped me to see it as a gift sort of out here. And
Yeah.
then further on, when I was a teenager, I was one of the oldest kids in my family, and my father depended on me helping out my mom. And one of the ways I was required to help was that I was the driver of a 12-seater van full of teenagers going to youth group on the Wednesday evening activities before I had a driver's license. So, one of these particular instances, I was driving and I was turned around having a lovely discussion, I'm sure, with my younger brothers. And I'm sure it was full of love and harmony and all that. And when I turned back forward, there was a car in front of me that I should have hit. There's no reason I did not hit that car except that it did not hit us. It kind of went away. And at the time, I thought, well, that was funny. And pondering it since then, I think I was protected. I think a little bubble was created so that I went around. So I was just I was made aware of these sort of protective gifts that I had been given.
Yeah. Yeah. And you pursued music, which is amazing. Music was such a big part of my life, and I really look at it as it's been such a gift in my life in that, as a young person, I spent a lot of time playing the piano. I spent a lot of time playing the flute. And those things, I didn't know this at the time, but I recognize now that I was really processing a lot of my emotions through that medium of music. I
Absolutely.
want, yeah. So I'm really curious about your pathway into music and how that has shaped your life as well.
That started about 11, 12. About that same year, I was in the sixth grade, and the music teacher in school came over into our sixth grade room, and she was looking for me because she was involved in the seventh and eighth grade honor choir, but she wanted me to come be a part of the seventh and eighth grade honor choir when I was in the sixth grade. So
Mm,
she sought me out, right, for that gift because in her classes I had loved it, and she had seen that aptitude, I guess is how you would say that. And so I had the gift of being around sort of advanced for my age music, right? And I understood that I could be involved in that. And then uh, the home that I grew up in, 9 of us in 3 bedrooms, required me to be in the living room for part of my teenage years, which made the piano a wall in my room. And
mm.
so I got to learn how to play the piano with an Alfred primer and a hymn book in the piano bench, and I just figured it out. And I too, like you said, I figured out that I was using it to release emotions when they asked me to play at church and I was playing the hymns like there was no softness in my hymns. There was not worship, there was release and angst and all those feelings, right? So yeah, that happened for me too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what prompted you, and you can go, back to another time period, but this a shift from being a teacher to doing energy work or even studying energy work, as it sounds like you began studying that before transitioning out of teaching. What what prompted that change in your life?
My whole life, I've always wondered what makes people do what they do. So I have read the books about why people do what they do. I have gone to years and years of therapy at different times, not in a row, but every time I needed some help solving a problem, therapy was the answer for me, right? And uh, and so uh, I spent 23 years in my previous marriage working through some stuff and raising my kids and working through my own stuff and attributing a lot of the problems in my life to the physical circumstances surrounding that situation, right? Lots of joys and lots of beauty, and also some things that were really painful about that situation. And I had always told myself if I could have a different setup, if I could live somewhere else, if I could be with someone else, there might be difference, right? So fast forward, I did experience a divorce, and then I stepped into a second marriage, and all of the outside things changed. It was a very big change. About a year and a half into that marriage, all of a sudden I'm still me in my head. All of a sudden, all those thoughts about whether I was good enough or not, or whether I wanted to even live or not, entered me again and became present. And that was when I realized it had nothing to do with what was outside of me and a whole lot more to do with what was going on inside of me. And since I had been to therapy all the times and I had all those tools in place, I knew that wasn't going to do it for me. So the first step into that, I found EMDR and I learned about brain or trauma in the brain and how trauma makes us react differently than ordinary emotions do. And after that, there were a series of sort of appointments with different people who showed up in my life, and I found a coach that connected with me very well, and she helped me to see some gifts that I had inside of me that um, a regular therapist was unable or untrained, I guess I would say, to look in that direction. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what made the shift for me was a shift into energy work and understanding I am my authority. It's in here. It's not really out there. I can learn from people out there, but they're not my fix. They're steps in the way, but I am in control of that for me.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, because energy work outside of the world of energy work looks rather strange, or what's going on, or how does this work? What would you say to people who are curious about it or have an interest but don't really know anything about energy work? What is it exactly? And again, what was it that kind of tugged you in that direction? I just feel this like pulling you in that direction. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Again, I've always wondered why people do what they do, right? So personality tests and trying to figure all that out and all that stuff. But also, it's quantum theory, kind of essentially. And I say that like I know what quantum theory is, and I really don't, but I know what people are saying about it out in the world, right? So it's starting to be studied and understood that we all affect each other on a level that none of us can see or really understand. And an example of quantum theory would be the life of Jesus Christ. However, you believe about that, he made an impact in the world that then impacts the world forever. Also, the life of Hitler. Whatever you believe caused that, he made an impact. Everyone thinks differently because of the things that happened under his regime. It affects us as a culture, whether we know it's affecting us or not. That's energy work. It just is. And so that helped me to understand um, greater forces outside of ourselves, but also, again, the ability. So I use a muscle tester, and understanding that a muscle tester gets information from the body instead of this super smart brain of mine, which I need, but is to only trying to keep me alive. It's not really interested in progress. Understanding the difference between that ego brain and that the body still holds information, those are, separate systems, was really, really helpful for me and helped me to understand energy work.
Yeah, yeah. What was that like beginning to study energy work? What was that experience like for you?
Well, the book, The Body Keeps the Score, was the first book about trauma brain. In my life, I have been gifted experiences that add up, right? So my very first experiences with energy work and was that when I had a little baby girl that had a nosebleed and I could not solve it and the doctors could not solve it. And so then the book that came to me then was Feelings Buried Alive Never Die.
Hmm.
And when I understood what nosebleeds meant in an energetic way, it helped her with those nosebleeds. And I guess the short answer to your question is books. Books have always helped me. It's kind of always been books, right? I've always read. There's another clue for you, right? I've always been interested. When I was in first grade, I filled out the little book form for myself and I put 6 because I was 6 years old. So the books that came to me were sixth grade and I
Oh,
ate them up. I read, and then somebody else said, "You should have been able to read those. Those are for 12-year-olds. You're a 6-year-old, right?" So I've always loved books and I've always loved whatever. Like my age didn't stop me from the books in front of me. So reading those books, and so then the reading books about the trauma and how it can affect you, and understanding that I had PTSD even though I had never been in war. PTSD is individual. My home life was a war zone for me. And
hmm.
and it didn't have to be what anybody else said was overly traumatic or whatever, right? So does that kind of answer your question? That's kind of the beginning understanding for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now you use the term professional intuitive. What does that mean to you, and how did you develop your skills and intuition?
Professional means I get paid for it, right? As opposed to amateur. So I was walking around, we all are intuitives. We all have intuitive gifts. I spent a long time helping people with my intuitive gifts without being aware that that's what I was doing. Just knowing things in the classroom, knowing how to help certain people, knowing what needed to be said as opposed to what I had planned on saying. Um, Running into people in the grocery store and being helpful to them in a way that they then later said, but I wasn't intending or whatever, or being helped by someone else that way. And so now I do session work with individuals. I use my muscle tester as my tool and the books in front of me and the hours I've spent reading the books about why people do what they do. And I allow that information to pop up to be helpful to the clients in front of me.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, you also mentioned that you're an astrologist. And so,
Yeah.
how did that develop? Like, where did that interest come from, and how do you pursue that?
I have always loved the stars. Laying out on the trampoline as a kid at night, looking up and wondering, that's always been, right, a beautiful place to hang out. Uh, in the culture I was raised in, it was sort of not allowed to give it any more credit than that. So fast forward into my energy work world and the new understandings I was gaining, somebody I followed on Facebook offered a retreat. I think that I inspired that retreat for her, actually. She later said she was just one day, she said, "I need to have a retreat," and it kinda came out of the blue, and I did the math, and for a week before that, I had been walking around saying, "I need a retreat. I need a retreat. I need something." I thought I was gonna have to have one myself because I just needed one, and then I literally was the first person signed up for her retreat, and what she needed before I signed up for the retreat was my birth information. I was supposed to come with my birth chart, my star chart, to this particular retreat. So I wasn't looking for astrology, I was looking for retreat. I knew I wanted a retreat. Couple beautiful things happened at that retreat though, but astrology was one of them. So that's when I was able to print it out and able to see it and have questions about it and then take it there and gain understanding at that retreat. And that opened up huge doorways for me in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that you had felt like that you were struggling and you were feeling like you needed to change your circumstances in order to get out of this struggle. And then circumstances changed, but then after a couple of years you looked around and you went, okay, everything looks different, but I'm still me here.
Yeah.
So what shifted and changed for you? Because then I believe if I'm following correctly, that's when you started discovering energy work and so forth. Did you find that healing? What was that experience of moving through learning these new skills uh, beyond what you had already learned in therapy? What was that like for you?
Good question. The main thing that happened is I was able to see all of the experiences in my life through different lenses.
Mm,
For example, um, I was sandwiched in between two high demand people as a sibling in my family. And I always saw that as I was less than, I was the only one doing the work, I was the responsible one. And in an energy session, when I got quiet with myself, I was able to understand the things I learned from being in that position are the gifts that I have now that I can use as gifts, right? And
mm,
singing is one of those things. I always knew I could sing, and I was told that I was given that gift to help those around me and to wait until somebody asked me to sing, right? Somebody invited me to the seventh, eighth grade choir. Somebody invited me to play the piano for somebody. Somebody else asked me, right? And so I was using that gift, but only if somebody out here asked me to use that gift, right? Um, in energy work, it was brought out that that is a gift that God gave me to connect to God. And
yeah.
I knew that I always felt better when I was singing, but I still previously had waited for an opportunity to come from out here as opposed to bringing it into my morning work every day, right? So those kinds of things. It helped me to look back on the experiences of my life. At that retreat, we were told to bring our name and how we got our name. Up until that point, my name was a problem for me.
Mm,
The story of my birth is that I was going to be Terra Leona, and then I was born, and that was too fancy for me. So I got Terry Lee.
mm.
So the message I took was I wasn't fancy enough to meet the name. So I need a more simplified name. That was the story. Whether that's how they said it or not, that's what got into my brain. I know that some of my siblings will say that's not what they used to say. Doesn't matter. That's what got into my brain.
All right.
So at this retreat, I had been singing in my morning routine and singing in my prayers. And one of the songs I like to sing is in the garden. and he walks with me and he talks with me, and the joy we share as we tarry there. I had been singing that for about a year. In this
Mm,
retreat, when I was about to say my name and we were talking about the name thing, that song, and the joy we share as we tarry there. And I heard my name instead of Tarry. And a flooding, I just knew I do that. I tarry, I linger with people. That is my work, that is my love. I am willing to linger and smell the flowers. I am willing to linger and hold space for emotions. And so those kinds of things, understanding that my mom may have been inspired instead of judging me, that is such a different shift, a different way of looking at that. At every situation in my life that I felt judgment or took judgment from it because I didn't understand yet,
yeah, yeah.
became apparent.
So would it be correct to say that you did find healing through energy work, that the things shifted for you and you were able to um move through the depression or the sadness or the um feeling like, not enough. It sounds like you're able to move through that. Did that moving through that, did that feel like a process or did it feel like an event?
Very much a process. I can pinpoint events. It's kind of interesting, right? Recently, as I've become more secure in where I stand, and people are saying, "What has made a change in you?" And I talk about some, things, and somebody said, "No, I want to know what you did. I need a stair step of what you did." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know that I could give you one, but a one that I could give you is I did stop at one point under a challenge from my coach to feel where God's love happened in my body,
Mm,
specifically the love of God and the approval and love of my God for me. And when I figured out where that happened in my body that's different from all the other warm, tingly feelings that we feel, that was majorly impactful to
mm,
understand that I am loved underneath it all.
yeah.
Mhm.
Is that something you can share with us, that experience of feeling God's love?
Um, yeah, I have been prayerful. I've been a prayerful person for most of my life, but I allowed the culture to tell me how I should pray.
Hmm.
And when I came to understand that this is the most defensive posture in all of humankind, and that maybe I could open myself up a little bit to God's love. And when I really understood that God isn't a man, I don't know what he is, but I know he isn't he. He is they. He is he and he is she and he is they. Um, he's not right. When that shifted for me, I was able to open up more to what that meant as far as my ability to be loved and nurtured by a God who had enough aspect to their personality that they weren't only masculine in nature, which I
Hmm.
couldn't relate to very clearly. And so one particular day, I was in my meditation and I was reading through some scripture, and just a scripture popped at me. And the words of the scripture said, "It's not you. You're not wrong." Of course, it didn't say that, but that's what I heard it say. "You are not wrong." And that was what I needed. That was what my head needed to hear. Like, Terry isn't wrong. And that just opened the floodgates to then, okay, so if all this didn't happen because I'm wrong, that's no longer true, then what could be true about why all these things happened? So that was the first step in that. And then where do I feel it in my body happened about a week later. I got really like, where do I feel it in my body? And I don't like to say where because I don't want to give preconceived notions to anybody else, right? You're going to
Right.
feel it in a different place perhaps, right? And maybe it's this, whatever, right? But what I know is that it was different for me than verification of truth or then we're feeling warm and yummy right here in the room. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what what are the things, the highlights for you as far as astrology goes? what are the benefits of, and I had to say, as I'm listening to you, I'm like, yes, 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 because I also have had this connection with music. I've also had this connection with books and reading and learning. And the books that you mentioned, I'm very familiar with them. I remember reading, and this ages me, but I remember reading I'm Okay, You're Okay when I was like, I don't even know how old I was, but I was still in school. It wasn't like I was in college or an adult or something, because I also had such an interest in what makes people tick. And then having experiences that were kind of beyond the ordinary and trying to make sense of them. And I had, and we all have this, right? Like we all have these, like the story that you had about your name. Like we all have these things that we pick up on as kids that then later we get to look at from a higher perspective and re-engage with that belief. And so, early on in my life, the experiences that I was having, I very much connected with what religion was telling me, what my, parents were telling me, what my religious leaders were telling me. And over time, I started to look at these things and reinterpret some of those things. But also this interest in astrology, and then this that I had from a young age. And at the time, it was just like I would get excited when there was a zodiac chart, or the what is the message for the day. and
Mhm.
and then I was told by the people around me that, oh, that's just that's hooky stuff. That's, don't mess with that. It's just for play, or to the extreme, like that's, the devil's work or whatever, right? So I
Right.
had all these messages that maybe astrology wasn't correct or wasn't a thing. But I discovered over time, as I began studying human design and then astrology, and it has been, for me, it's been very impactful. So I'm curious how that impacted you as you learned your own astrology. Did that feel um, revelatory, or did it feel confirming, or what were some of your experiences as you learned your own astrology?
I love you saying you'd love to read the charts when you were younger, right? I remember specifically one that I was reading out loud in the kitchen, and my dad said, "Well, even a clock, even a broken clock is right twice a day, or whatever, right? Like to minimize it." Yeah. So I've always known I'm different than other people and been very aware of that. And so the first right off the top is, yeah, I am different, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, and it's by design. It's supposed to be that way. That's not something wrong that anybody needs to change, right? So my astrological chart gave me permission to be different, which, whatever, take that as however you're going to take it. But that's what the first thing right off the top did for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then to understand that one of the ways I'm different is that I have gotten feedback that my life looks easy to some of the people around me.
Mm.
So then when I was sitting in a room with 60 people all with our charts up, I could see mine versus theirs versus theirs versus theirs. And in my chart, most of my planets are in one section of the sky. Most of the planets were grouped in one section of the sky the moment I was born. So therefore, my gifts and talents are pretty straightforward. They're kind of in one section, as opposed to somebody who may have planetary placements in the whole chart. And that might be why they don't think astrology is true, because they don't relate to the sign they were born under, which is probably what they know about themselves, or the place the sun was in the sky, right?
Right.
So that understanding all by itself, like you could just stop there and it would have been really impactful and really permission granting for me, right? And
Mm.
forgiving of them, because I could see why they think it looks easy. I'm in it. It doesn't look easy to me, but I could forgive a little. Yeah, okay. I can see why you think that looks easy for me.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
just
Right.
starting there. And then when you go off into my Mercury, which is the little asteroid that tells us about our communication gifts and technology, amongst other things, my Pluto is right there tied to my Mercury. Pluto is life or death transformation, big impactful moments. So my sort of everyday communication And my big impactful moments are right there on top of each other, right? So I would be like, we're having a moment. And everybody around me is going, yeah, it's no, we're having a day. Everything, why do you have to make everything so dramatic and drastic? Well, that's why, right? There's a reason for that. And it isn't that I'm wrong or they're wrong. Stuff like that showing up.
Yeah, different perspective. I
Yeah.
know you asked me to send you my chart, so I'm just
Yeah.
curious what you noticed as you looked at my chart. I have studied it quite a bit, and I'm always interested in what other people notice.
Fantastic. Well, right off, you already knew that you were a Taurus, right? And I have some strong Taurus energy. And so what I asked you, that I'm uber aware of is like the 12th house. So before I got into sort of energy work or astrology, even, I wasn't aware of how strong the subconscious is at work in our lives. And your moon is in your 12th house, which means in the subconscious, which means your inner self and your emotional center is kind of behind your brain.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you have dealt with that, not really being able to understand your emotions.
Yeah, well, and it's I was this kid who was very introverted as a child, very in my head, like very like spacey, I would say.
Yeah.
And the route from my elementary school to home and in back was there was a cemetery. There was a very old cemetery that was
Okay.
on that route. And
Yes.
I would walk by that. This is elementary age. I would walk by that cemetery and wonder about all those people in
Wow.
that cemetery. Like, and I look back now and I go, that is such a strange thing for a kid to do.
You
But
didn't
it
run
was
screaming from it, right? You were interested in wanting to know more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and now looking at my life, I see how spirit communication has been such a big part of my life from the time I was very young. And I think that speaks to that moon in that 12th house of spirituality, of subconscious, and it's just kind of some. And then the other thing that's interesting is that my Pluto is right next to
I was
my
just going to say
moon.
that. Yes.
Yeah, so I have that, yeah, that transformative life death, like the emotions run deep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Pluto's happy in the subconscious because then he can just do his work and there's not so much block in the way. Yeah.
Mhm.
You also have Uranus there. And so you have a lot of 12th house energy, right? That's how somebody could say that most people would not be aware of, right? That there's a large amount of planetary energy going on in your 12th house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which probably points to why I do the work that I do. Why I
Absolutely.
talk about spiritual experiences, why I talk about spirit communication, angel communication, why I pursue mediumship and do intuitive work as well and angel
Yes.
readings and so forth. So yeah, it's and discovering that I wonder if you had the same experience because I think when I discovered my human design
Mhm.
and astrology, it's just been really in the last few years.
Yep.
And I'm not a spring chicken, I've got I've got grown kids and grandkids and
Mhm.
I sometimes I look at it and I think if I had discovered this even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, would I have connected with it as much as I do now? Because I've had enough life experience that now I look at it and it just makes so much sense and it's very confirming. Whereas if I had seen this earlier, I don't know if I would have been as connected to it. Has that been your experience or the experience of some of your clients?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In that retreat, right? If I had not been this through this many years, the validation that happened, it may not have been possible. 100%. And the Chiron, I happen to be in my Chiron return.
Hmm.
So before we go to that, though, I wanted to say your sun is also in your ninth house.
Yes.
So what people might not be aware of is ninth house is the house of higher education and deeper understandings. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that you're going to take those 12th house gifts and not accept them on a surface level. You're going to go deeper in it and you're going to be able to share it with the world because you have a deeper understanding, a broader understanding of that. And that's how you know who you are, is through your deeper and broader understandings. And that's what makes you tick. So therefore you could offer that to your people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost a little bizarre, and I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to people, but when I learn something, I it's like I have to learn it at a deep level and then I have to share it, which is also in my chart. So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of people just they learn things. I often I am so immensely curious as an individual. This is why I
Right.
love these conversations. I'm
Hmm.
so immensely curious that I can't just leave things alone. I have to dig in deeper. And then I have this like compulsion to share what I'm learning. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to people. They're like, well, yeah, go off and learn your things, but why do you have to be so, like, why do you have to talk about it?
Right. Right.
I
Because
have
I
to.
do. Because we're all different from each other, right? Yeah. It's in here and I can't keep it in. It's yes, absolutely. That can show up like that.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Chiron, the wounding, like understanding that I brought with me something that I could heal, but it was going to feel like a wound until I healed it was kind of a beautiful thing. My Chiron shows up in Aries, and Aries is the first one on the chart that is I am. This is who I am and this is where I belong. And when you've got Chiron in Aries, and if you're about my age, you do, because they happen in 7 or 8 year groups. Um, you will not know where you belong. Nobody does, right? And so in my family of origin, the two kids on either side of me were very different from me and very alike each other. So I didn't belong right there, right then. From the start, it looked as though I didn't belong. And
Mm,
then that was echoed to me and echoed to me and echoed to me. And I had a hard time with friend groups. And then I was at that retreat during my Chiron return. So a return happens when a planetary body returns to the same place in the sky it was when you were born. Your birthday is your solar return. The sun
mhm,
goes back to the same place, right? So Chiron returns happen about 28 to 31, and then they happen about 48 to 52, 53. And I happened to be about 51 when this retreat happened. And I was able to fit in with that group of women in a way that I had not fit in with very many groups of people previous to that. And I was
mhm,
able to see how I fit in, not because I was the same as them, but because I was different than them, but we all had similar goals, right? So a different kind of understanding of belonging happened in that space than I had ever been aware of before. So that's an example of the wound came back to visit. I was in a new opportunity where I could either have made more friends or gone away with like, see, told you can't make friends. And
mhm.
because I was aware of that, I could shift my thinking to yes, made friends, felt like a group, felt belonging in that group, right? So
Yeah.
that's
And it sounds like had healing in that space of the I am, in the space of this is who I am.
absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What other things would you like to share before we close? Are there other highlights that you would like to share with us before we go?
Good question. I would love to spread the message far and wide that it is as easy to connect over positive, loving experiences as it is to connect over painful, challenging experiences.
Mm,
I will love seeing our whole community lean that direction. For example, have you ever noticed that when you go to the grocery store and you say to somebody, "How are you?" and they say, "I'm good," and you go, "Great, I'm good," and then everybody walks away feeling less than connected?
mhm,
But if somebody says, "Oh, having the old hip is hurting today," And you go, oh yeah, that, when I walk this and it's hard, and you have a real connection with somebody, right? If they're willing to share something that is challenging, because for some reason we are more willing to share challenging things. So I've kind of taken it as my mission, sort of, and my job in life to help people see that we can connect over what is good, what's going good. And so it kind of works, right? When they say I'm good, I kind of say, well, what's good? What's good? How are you good? Right? And sometimes they go, well, I'm not dead, which is kind of good.
I woke up this morning.
Well, you look good or whatever, right? People are not prepared with their what they're good, how they're good. So a challenge I offer to anybody who wants to take me up on it is, can you figure out how you're good? If somebody asked you at the grocery store, how are you? And you said, I'm good. And they said, how? Can you answer that question? Where do you get permission to have something good to be able to share? And the
Mm,
reason that's instructive, I think, is the Einstein quote that says, the biggest job any of us ever have is to decide whether we live in a friendly or a hostile universe. You live in both. Absolutely. There is hostility surrounding you, and there is goodness and joy surrounding you. The choice is, where are you going to spend your time hanging out?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, in what ways do you experience your spiritual life? And the reason I say that is because we're all spiritual beings, whether we recognize it or not. So I'm just curious how you experience your spiritual life, how that has changed, say, from 20 years ago, or, how has that changed as you look back on how maybe it looked earlier in your life and how it looks now?
The number one thing about that has changed is that I am in charge of creating the space wherein my spiritual life happens.
Mm,
It used to be I had to go to a different building or go be around a different group of people or let some other authority create that space for spiritual experiences. Now I decide where I'm going to have those experiences. And here in my office is one of the places, and in my bedroom is another one of the places. And I just choose that, right? The difference is I choose where my spiritual places are. And and I choose what my prayer looks like now and what my spiritual experiences contain. And they don't have to conform to what somebody else says. This is how you have a spiritual experience. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody starts somewhere. I think that if I hadn't been taught that there was a possibility of having spiritual experiences, I wouldn't have been able to step into them, right? So,
mm,
but we all grow up at some point, and so we all get to decide if we get to then determine or if we're going to still lean on what they did. And some people will lean on, and there's nothing wrong with that. They are different because that's their design, right? So the number one difference for me is I decide where my spiritual experiences are going to happen. The second thing that I will say loudly is that I'm looking for different evidences of spiritual experiences.
mm,
The feeling in my body, right, is different than it is when it used to be in those situations. I'm willing to accept that my brain can see the synchronicities in front of me and point out, oh, you've been here before. And then my spirit can take over and tell me what that synchronicity might mean. Right. So both my brain and my spirit are connected with those spiritual experiences. I'm willing to accept. I think I just saw a twinkle of light over there. And before my brain would have said, well, is there a short in the lamp? Or did the blind
mm,
flutter? Or is there a breeze? Nah, it doesn't matter if that's what caused the sparkle of light over there. For me, a sparkle of light is a confirmation.
yeah,
However, that can happen, right? So I'm willing to play with my imagination and allow that to be information in my spiritual world, as opposed to just my flights of fancy.
yeah. And dismissing the experiences.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love to ask all my guests, and that is, what are some of your spiritual practices that help you, maybe day to day or week to week?
Again, space is important for me. I am a Virgo, which means a rock, an earth sign. So in a space matters to me. I put music on in my background when I need a shift of mood. I When I notice I'm not feeling a way that's desirable, I check for a minute. Is there something I can do to change this, right? And I do ask my muscle tester and I ask my intuition, or do I need to feel this for a second and then change it? So stopping and giving that time instead of just autopilot what I need to do about any certain feeling is important for me. I use crystals and I use the books around me still, and I tap into my spiritual team. So awareness that I had a spiritual team as opposed to just a God or a Holy Spirit that were on my side. Excuse me, my ancestors are on my spiritual team. I have dragons on my spiritual team. And the rest I will leave up to your imagination about what you guys it could be on your spiritual team. But allowing imagination and spiritual life to help each other out was kind of a key for me to understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Well, Terry, I know there's going to be people who are going to want to connect with you. So tell us the best place that people can find you.
On Facebook, I'm there regularly and I'm branching out, so there will be more soon. My email is my name, TERI.WALTHALL @gmail.com. I'm happy to respond to any emails. I would love to hear from anybody over email. And I currently have a Stan Store account. So Stan Store /Teri Walthall is how you could find me to set up there in that space. There is a way to make an appointment for a 30-minute free astrological beginning, I guess is how I would say that. I will help people understand what their sun and their moon and their Chiron are, because those were the sort of most impactful for me to understand me and my journey. And so that can be found at stanstore /Teri Walthall.
Okay. Amazing. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's been a delight to talk to you today.
Thank you, Julie. It's been delightful for me too. Thank you so much.